Welcome to The Homeless Conservative. I'm your host, Blake Fisher. Thank you for joining me, doing another solo one, because yesterday I got into the weeds late last night researching some stuff, and the numbers seemed kind of crazy, and so I just wanted to talk about them today because it seems like a bigger problem that I'm not hearing enough about. And so if you've got kids, this is not a good episode to listen to with kids that can hear, because unfortunately it's about sexual abuse of kids by teachers. And so I'm going to be talking about a lot of stuff that's probably just not for their ears, but it's probably concerning to you. So, stick around and listen, but maybe not with them. This all started because I was researching, I'd come across a 2004 study by the Department of Education that estimated that 1 in 10 kids are sexually, what's the actual stat here? I'm going to pull this up because I'm going to say it wrong if I don't. Okay, the Department of Education study says that 1 in 10 K through 12 students experience sexual misconduct by school employees by the time they graduate high school. We're going to get into some definitions in a second, but that number seemed pretty high to me. Okay, 1 in 10, that's, there's 50-something million kids in school. You divide that by 13 years because they're talking about K through 12. It happens at some point over their primary education careers. And, then if so divide that by 13. And then if I divide that by that percentage, it's really 9.6%. That's hundreds of thousands of cases a year. I think it's important, though, because misconduct is different than abuse, that we should talk about some definitions. So the Department of Education partnered with a research scientist, and I don't have her name up in front of me. I will find that and put it in the notes. And in their kind of intro to the report, they say, look, there is some problems with this report because sometimes they're interchanging misconduct and abuse. And so they did try to segment out like what portion of that was misconduct, which means like maybe inappropriately saying something to someone, making a crass joke. Those could be misconduct, or texting someone something inappropriate without it crossing the line of being physical abuse. And I think that is an important distinction to make. And unfortunately, when this came out in 2004, most of the news articles I found, the teachers union seemed to be making that excuse. They were like, well, this report is just lumping in all misconduct, which is serious, but it's not as serious as abuse. And the truth, these teachers unions basically just kept parroting the line of, well, school is still the safest place for your kids to be. It's very safe. It's not going to happen. Well, okay, so let's just look at abuse, which abuse is defined as it involves an act where one knowingly causes another person to engage in a sexual act by threatening or placing that other person in fear, or engages in a sexual act with another person that is A, incapable of appraising the nature of the conduct, aka all children, B, physically incapable of declining participation in or communicating unwillingness to engage in that sexual act, and B. Oh, that's it. Okay, so those are the two things. The problem with that is that, all kids in school meet that criteria for abuse if there's contact. So if we just look at the contact version of abuse, not the I said something inappropriate, there's have to be physical contact between the two. That is basically boils down to 7.5% of the U.S. school population will go through that at some point. So that is 300,000 cases a year. Remember, like 55 million divided by 13, divided by 7.5%. That's 300,000 cases a year. And I thought my math had to be wrong. That seemed like such a big number for me to be having to work so hard to find that number. And so I called my mom. I was like, okay, you're good at math. Tell me my math is right on this. And we agreed that is correct. And I even tried ChatGPT just to check it out and see if it also gave me the same number. I was just making sure my math is correct. How we get to that number, just so you understand a little bit about how they got there. They basically looked at all these surveys of sexual abuse. Specifically, there were two that they looked at. They did one in, I think, 1993, and then the same one in 2001. It was one group that did it. And what they found was they asked 8th through 11th graders. So each period of time, they just asked that small cohort, have you ever, had these kind of things happen to you in your school? At school specifically, And they were asking about peer-to-peer and teacher. So they would ask a question like, has this happened to you? And if they said yes, they'd say like, well, at the hands of who? Was it a peer? Was it an educator? So they went back and looked at all this data and basically extrapolated based on the answers how much of it was done by the educators themselves. And when I say teachers, I am lumping in all school faculty. So it could be administrators, it could be teachers, it could be janitors, it could be coaches, it could be volunteers, it could be like kind of anyone in the realm of the adults in charge at the schools. So they looked at those responses, which were done in like a survey form where they would be representative, with a plus minus of an error rating and a margin of error. And, statistically they could extrapolate that, okay, well, across the entire United States, then this is happening, like I said, in 7.5% of students are going to experience this before they graduate high school. And that's just crazy to me. And really the office, there's not been another Department of Education study since 2004. Part of this is because what happened, I was wondering, why did this only happen in 2004 and hasn't happened since? Because if you remember, 2004, we did not have smartphones. They're looking at 2001 and 1993 data for the 2004 report. Most of us didn't even have cell phones when they're talking about this, because I was in high school in 2001. If I would have been one of the people surveyed for this, I did not have a cell phone yet. There was no way for a teacher to have inappropriate conversation with me that could lead to that kind of behavior. Because it just, what are you going to call my house phone? And so we've not done a study of this post 2004. And that seems a little bit crazy to me. It seems like we should probably look into this. If those numbers are really as high as they are, we should be throwing lots of money at studies for this, right? Okay, so under Trump's administration, Betsy DeVos, who was the Secretary of Education, she basically wanted the Office of Civil Rights to do another study about specifically, abuse by teachers and stuff it wasn't just about teachers. It was just across the board. Like, are they, abused by peers or teachers, et cetera. They looked at the numbers from 2015-2016 school year and then compared them to the 2016-2017 school year. And they only looked at reported incidents. Okay. Those reported incidents went up 55% in those two school years. So in 2015-16 school year, there were 9,600 cases, and by 2018, there were 14,900 cases reported. So a 55% increase just in those two school years. I think that kind of means one of two things. Hopefully one more than the other. It either means A, we are reporting it more, which would be good. It means people are getting caught more. That would be good news. It would be bad news if the actual number of incidents are going up, because it's estimated that only 5 to 6% of child abuse cases are ever reported. So you can see where you get to the numbers, even going backwards. So if you look at, now keep in mind, these are numbers where they were looking at peer-to-peer stuff too. So they're probably going to be larger, but you can do that math. You can say 15,000 students. And if only 5 to 6%, if that's the 5 to 6% that's reported, you do that math, you get up to 300,000 incidents. Now that would be including peer-to-peer ones. So obviously there's a discrepancy there. I don't know. Are there 300,000 incidents where it's peer-to-peer and abuse by teachers? Or are there 300,000 just by teachers? The truth is we don't know. We're doing this based on a couple surveys from, at the latest, 2001. And then they did some more surveys of the specifically reported incidents in the mid-2010s. But we just don't have enough information on this. It's shocking to me that in all the Googling and research I tried to do for this, most of the articles were from 2004 when the report came out. There's been a few things since, and there's a few organizations that are doing stuff. But, it's like sporadically, it's like, here's the thing from 2001. Here's something from 2004. Here's something from 2015. This feels like it should be a bigger deal, because we think about, when we talk about kids specifically, school shootings are in the news all the time. It's all we hear about is like, our kids are safe, gun violence and kids. Well, I mean, in 2022, you had it 2,000 times more likely to be abused by a teacher in school than you were to be shot at school. 2,000 times. Okay. That's because there were And 2022 was a bad year for school shootings because it involved Uvalde. So, I mean, that's the highest of the peak. And we should try to do everything we can to prevent school shootings. It deserves the media attention. I just think that this also deserves media attention. I'm not saying we shouldn't cover school shootings. I'm saying we should cover sexual abuse by teachers in schools as much or more because it's a bigger problem just based on the numbers, okay? Even if, let's just say the Department of Education, let's say that all this research they did in survey research, let's say that it overrepresented by 10x, you would still have 30,000 cases instead of 300,000 cases. That would still be a really, really high number. That's more people than get murdered every year that's all, so I just think that we've got to, pay more attention to this. And I don't think that we are. Okay, so let's talk about this report a little bit more. It came about because George W. Bush, when they passed No Child Left Behind, one carve out in the law was that it wanted the Department of Education to do a study on sexual abuse by teachers of students. And so they had to do it within 18 months. And so that's why it's released in 2004. That's why this report exists. And I'm guessing the reason it hasn't happened since is because they're not required by law to do so. And they had a deadline and requirement in the law, and we just haven't had that since. So maybe we need to make them do another one. It seems weird to me that they're not willing to just try it themselves. I don't know why you wouldn't be like, this is something worth looking into. I would guess, this isn't just me being a conspiracy theorist, I'm sure the teachers unions have a lot to do with it. They protect teachers more than they protect kids. We'll talk more about that when we talk about solutions. But like I said, it's in 2004, mostly using data from 2001, 1993, and we don't have smartphones at the time. So it just seems like it should be more prevalent now, I would think. And so I think we need more information. But a few of the things that would be that are important, I think, in the Department of Education stuff is they do talk about misconduct as well, which I think should also be a big deal because the misconduct leads sometimes to abuse. So the misconduct might be inappropriately text messaging or saying inappropriate things or having inappropriate conversations. And that's a way that they're grooming the victim, right? And I'm not saying that this is always how it happens because the average age of the offenders is 28. So it is more of a thing that happens or seems to happen with younger school employees. And I don't have any information because unfortunately it didn't go into a lot about like the ages, but there probably are situations where this is a 24-year-old and a 17-year-old and we can go, I have friends that have wives younger than that age difference. It's not a problem because they were in their 20s and 30s when they met, but like, the thing is, we might say that, okay, it might be okay for a 24-year-old to have a relationship with a 17-year-old. I mean, I don't really think it is, but we can discuss that. They're at least closer in age than like a 50-year-old. But to me, the line in the sand is that you are their authority figure. So there's no way for you to have an appropriate sexual relationship with someone that you're the authority figure. It's abuse. It doesn't matter if they think they're consenting. It doesn't matter if they're a minor. And actually, I honestly don't even think it should matter if you're a minor. I was 18 my entire senior year. I still think that it should not be legal for a teacher to have a sexual relationship with a student of theirs in primary education, even if they're 18. I just think that would be, we don't need to have the age thing. Technically, legal adult when you're 18, maybe a senior in high school if you're a little older for your grade, like me, because I was an immature boy that started late. But I just don't think that's appropriate. So, but we don't have a lot of these things in case because there's no federal. So we'll talk about the solutions to this problem in a little bit, if there are any, but there's no federal guidelines for this kind of stuff. And so this is all left up to districts and states, which I'm generally very much for, but I do think there needs to be a little bit of guidelines. It doesn't have to be rules and laws, but it could be the Department of Education going, look, we think this should be the baseline for how this stuff stops. And it's just not really happening right now. So, in 2022, we saw 350 arrests for sexual misconduct or really abuse because you can't get arrested for misconduct. So for sexual abuse by K through 12 educators. So that's last year. 350 cases across the country, I would obviously assume that number is very, very low. That's just the arrest, because again, there's a lot of situations where there's not enough evidence to arrest someone, or it gets brought to the school's attention and they just let the person resign instead of firing. That's another big problem. And that person then goes on to another district. I mean, this is, I really, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around this because I'm so mad at these numbers that this is possible. So there's another problem. How does this happen? I guess is the first question. Is like, okay, we got some numbers. How is it happening that this is happening so often and with so little consequences? It seems like we're not seeing this in the news. We're not seeing a lot of firings. We saw 350 arrests last year, but if there were really 300,000 incidents and only 350 arrests, we're obviously not, there's a huge gap there, right? Okay, so how is this happening? Well, one way it happens is that students don't report when it happens. You know, I mentioned 5 to 6% they think only 5 to 6% of incidents get reported. So you're already working with a really small number where the student's going to come forward and say, hey, I was abused by a teacher, especially because a lot of times they don't think they're being abused. You know, they think that it's okay. They think that person loves them. They think whatever, you know, because they are being tricked by their abuser. So that's one problem. That's how it happens, is that, you know, there's a position of power there. And there's a CBS investigation into this specific thing from spring of 2023. And they looked at one specific district in California that had like 9 arrests over the course of a few years. And specifically, the last one that kind of really straw that broke the camel's back was a teacher got impregnated by her student. And it was kind of a big splash, obviously. Well, you know, they're like, well, how does this happen? And it just seems like that wouldn't be possible. And specifically in that case where the teacher was pregnant, upon investigation, so the police show up to the district HR office with a warrant that says, we get to go through your stuff. And the head of HR refuses to talk to the police and is actively deleting things. And when they intervene in Command Z, and she had been deleting like paragraphs out of documents. I mean, this is clearly, like I said, this is one specific district, but I'm sure it's indicative of what happens in other places. So she's deleting stuff. Now, she denies that it happened, but the police say that, look, we showed up. She's actively deleting stuff. She's trying to get rid of files. She won't talk to us. She's stonewalling us. And we've got a warrant to look through this stuff. And she claims that's not what happened. But basically, they found out that like the district knew about, or at least had credible allegations that this teacher was having inappropriate relationships with students. It was like a well-known thing, but no one was doing anything about it. And this is, of course, one of those situations where we have this incredible double standard in, I guess, America, but everywhere maybe, where like, oh, well, it's a female teacher and a male student. Oh, well, there's nothing wrong there because that's every boy's fantasy, is to sleep with their teacher. I think it's gross that we use that as an excuse. I really do. Look, boys' brains develop even slower than girls. Boys' brains are not fully developed till they're like 25. I don't care if you're 17, and most of them aren't 17 probably, but it's not okay. It's still sexual abuse. And we just like write it off because we're like, I mean, the fact that she got pregnant, I think made it a news story. I think if she wouldn't gotten pregnant, she just would have kept doing this. And without any consequences. It's crazy to me, okay? So that's one excuse. The other thing that happens is this sort of what they call passing the trash. What happens there is that a teacher might be accused of sexual abuse or misconduct. It gets somehow to administration, and instead of like firing that person or going to the police or whatever, that person, the abuser, basically resigns or retires. Maybe they're terminated, but they're allowed to basically just go work in another school district because there was no legal situation. They're not on a sex offender registry. There are situations there's a government accountability office investigation into some of these cases, and what they found that in some cases they knew of the abuse, they let the person resign or retire, and then they went on to another school district where they wrote them a letter of recommendation. They're a great teacher, even though they knew about these allegations. That should be criminal. If you help an abuser abuse another kid after you knew he abused one kid, and you allow that to happen by recommending that person work in another school district, you should be in jail. At the very minimum, you should not work in education ever again, but you should be in jail. I think you are an accomplice. You know this person's capable of doing that stuff. And what it is that these people always present as nice. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, like that's the MO. It's like you present as really nice, you're loving, you're secretly abusing kids. And so it's hard. I mean, I get that, like, if I worked with someone that I suspected doing something wrong, it would feel like there needs to be a high burden maybe, but we shouldn't need that high of a burden. I think if someone's doing something remotely inappropriate, that's why the misconduct comes into play. If they're doing something where they're having an inappropriate conversation, or I think I know someone's texting a student and I think that's wrong, or I catch a glimpse of something that's maybe just inappropriate, I think you got to take it to authorities. I mean, maybe not the police right away, because misconduct's not a police thing, but you should take it to principals, administrators, HR, whoever it needs to be. It needs to go to someone's attention. And that's what Title IX says has to happen with abuse. It says that teachers have to report abuse when they know about it. Whether a kid tells them or someone else tells them, they have to report it. They're legally obligated to do so. They're just not doing it with their coworkers. That's it, plain and simple. They're doing it if a kid comes to school and says they're abused at home. I think that that's a little easier because there's a disconnect there. But when you work next door to a friend and a colleague, and then you get a credible accusation or you see something that's weird, I get that that's harder. But again, what are you prioritizing? Are you prioritizing your comfort, or you're prioritizing the safety of your students? And to me, it's the former. You're not prioritizing the safety of students, or you would not care what someone thinks about you. Look, you were texting someone, you said that inappropriate joke to that girl. I'm reporting you for it because you shouldn't do it. We've got to have a better floor for what we expect of people. And we do this with all sorts of professions. I think the police need to be held to a higher standard because of the authority that we give them. And so teachers should be held to a higher standard. I'm not saying at all that all teachers are abusers or that they're aiding in abuse, but there is a bit of that going on when teachers unions protect these people, when administrators protect these people, let them move on to other districts. What else can you call it? You're protecting an abuser. And I think that I think teachers and schools have every reason to weed out all bad teachers, especially abusers, because then it makes, doesn't give any of them a bad name for the worst actors. And just like police, I say this with police all the time. The police should have a vested interest in getting rid of bad police officers from their ranks because they give everyone a bad name. When we have a police officer shoot someone unnecessarily, it makes all police look bad. If we have a teacher abuse a kid, it kind of makes all teachers look bad. It's not fair to paint that broad brush, but it is best for the organizations themselves, for teachers and teachers unions, to weed out the bad ones, just like it's good for police to weed out their own bad ones. It would show that you take it seriously. And we're just not seeing that happen enough. I mean, like I said, 300,000 potential of that 300,000 kids that are potentially, and by the way, that's another important distinction. Incidents, one kid could be abused multiple times. Those would be multiple incidences. So we don't count incidences. This prevalence is what we're looking at. We're saying over the course of 13 years that you're in school, what is the likelihood that you are abused by a teacher? And it's a 7.5% chance. And that then equates to 300,000 cases a year. It's just astronomical how big that number is. And it seems like we should be doing more about it. Okay, so that's kind of that initial report. There was also I mentioned the Government Accountability Office report, specifically looking at like, how does this happen? And I think that's an important one just to know, like, they looked at 15 specific cases and they saw that, in a lot of them, either a district was just in a hurry and didn't do a background check, and this person had, this criminal history and they were sex offenders and they hired them anyway, to, sometimes districts passed them along to someone else, just let them quietly resign, didn't take it to authorities. And then they go on to abuse in other places. So there's all these situations where, let's see. Okay. 52%. Let's see. I'm trying to find my stat here. Hold on. Sorry. Some more numbers that I think are important to know. This is there's this organization called Sesame, which is, stands for Stop Educator Sexual Abuse, Misconduct, and Exploitation. Everyone's got to have these acronyms. SesameNet.org is where you want to go. That's like the worst website URL, SesameNet.org. Anyway, they have some like legislation and some graphics and some stats and stuff. So a couple other stats that I think are important to know. So approximately 3 out of 4 offenders use technology to communicate with victims. This is looking at more recent information, obviously, not the 2004 information. So, mobile devices were the most common use of technology. Okay. So that's cell phones, and on average, offenders were sentenced to jail for 47 months if they were caught. I don't feel like 4 years is enough for abusing a kid. Call me crazy. Just doesn't seem right for me. We've got, let's see, what are the other stats here? 26 were in urban schools, 37 in suburban schools, 49% minorities, 53% economically disadvantaged. So they're going after poor kids. They're going after minorities. They're going after sometimes special needs, autistic kids, things like that. And they're picking victims based on who they think doesn't have other people around them that will find out. That's really what it boils down to. And so that's some crazy stats that we don't need to dive too much further into. So like, how do you solve this? Another thing, Department of Education, the other thing that CBS report mentioned was the Department of Education is investigating 145, at least this is earlier this year in 2023. They're investigating 145, I think, districts for what they thought were probably the districts doing the wrong thing about these reports coming to them, and either like letting someone go without contacting the authorities, things like that. And they're claiming like, hey, look, if someone's not doing the right thing, we're going to pull their funding. But so far I've not found that that's happened. And so they're investigating a lot of districts, but that's 145 districts in the country that they're like investigating actively right now about, I don't want to call them cover-ups because I don't think that, but it is kind of a cover-up. I mean, it's basically, look, this is bad. This would be bad for us. It'd be bad for the district. We just want to kind of quietly sweep it. And I know this is not everyone. But keep in mind, we had a friend that had a situation happen to their kid at school. It was by another peer, exposed themselves to them in the bathroom. And the school district did the right thing. They sent an email out to all the parents that said this situation happened. I mean, they obviously didn't release any names or anything, but they said it's been taken care of. But we wanted to let everyone know about it. Here's what happened. And I think that's the right way to do it. I think that when it's peer-to-peer, that seems easy because it's like, no, you shouldn't do this, children. For some reason, it's harder for some of these districts to do it when it's a teacher. And I get that. I get that that would be embarrassing, or maybe you think you did something wrong, but you didn't do anything wrong. You can do the right thing by going to the authorities and doing everything correct and firing the person and making sure that that person doesn't ever work in schools again. Kids need to know that they can report this. So, because we got to get above this 5% rate. That's atrocious. We've got to let kids know that they can tell us things. That's us as parents. That's teachers. That's communities. That's why these teachers are going to go after kids that don't have that. Maybe they don't have those parents. Maybe they don't have those people that they can talk to. And we've got to make that number be higher for sure. But then we also just have to, I think this is teachers and faculty's responsibility to look out for bad behavior and report it. I think that's pretty simple. Let's look at they've got some, basically here's like the things that Sesame says that we should do. They suspect that background checks are a problem. There's no federal mandate for states to conduct background checks for K through 12 school employees. Or contractors or volunteers. There's not a federal rule for that. And the state laws are all over the place. And so, there's some Sesame is saying we want that to be a federal law. You all know me. I'm never first to say it needs to be a federal law because I generally think states should be able to figure this out. I think it'd be easy enough for states to do that. It does seem like it would be an easy thing for the Department of Education to say, look, we think that these should be your guidelines. for how you do things. And if you want our funding, here's some things you have to do. They do that with all other kind of things. So why not do that a little bit here and say, hey, you should do background checks. I feel like a background check is a good thing to do for someone that's educating our kids. That seems simple. I don't know that it has to be federal, but states should at least do that. They also recommend that we create a national offender database and data collection. This gets a little trickier for me because I don't think we do a great job at running these databases. We currently have like the NICS system, which does the background checks for firearm purchases, and it misses stuff sometimes because different agencies don't send stuff to it or it's not connected to certain law enforcement. Education is way bigger than gun purchases. We're talking about 55 million kids in school or something right now. And there's something like 9,000 school districts or something. So that seems a little hard to do, but whatever. I'm okay with it. I mean, like I said, if it helps, I'm for it. If it just creates more bureaucracy that like gives us the illusion of a safety net or some sort of security, but doesn't actually do the job, then I don't want it. I mean, I only want things that are going to actually work and do the right thing. So to me, like getting with fingerprints and stuff like that, it seems like a background check would be good enough because if someone was convicted of something, and then maybe maybe one database of like, hey, if we fire an employee or let them go because of I think the misconduct thing specifically, I think that should go into some sort of database. I'd be okay with that. Like if someone has an inappropriate, even just relationship, even if it's not physical, with a student and they get let go for it, and so it's serious enough that they get fired or they retire or they leave or whatever and go on to another school district, I think there should be a database of that says, hey, we fired this person because of this. They should not give a letter of recommendation to a teacher they let go for that kind of thing. That seems insane to me. They're also saying Sesame wants to criminalize educator sexual misconduct. I do think this is a good idea. I mean, look, I guess not all states have laws that prohibit the sexual conduct, like, via texting or things like that. I don't know that it necessarily needs to be criminalized. I think where I would change this is I would just say that like it's a fireable, like it's a one strike you're out kind of situation. Like I said, I think it could be not criminally prosecutable to like, I don't want someone to go to jail because they texted a student. That seems excessive to me. But I do think it should be states get to go, look, especially with public schools. They obviously would not be able to do this with private schools, but most of this is in public schools anyway, because that's where most of the kids are. We could look at, say, okay, as I mentioned before, I would say that I don't want educators communicating one-on-one with students in any other form other than their school monitored email address. So no Facebook, no Instagram messages, no text messages. I would make an exception for that for groups. So like if a coach has a group text with an entire team, I'm fine with that. No, there's not going to be abuse going on in a group setting, I would think. And same thing for, if you have, I know lots of different districts have like an app that you use to communicate with the teacher, and it's great. Like that'd be fine because it's monitored. We can monitor. Or if it's a text message with the individual student, the parent, someone needs to be CC'd on it, like period. It needs to be able to be monitored by the school district or another person. So the rest of the team in the group text situation, a parent in that kind of situation. I think it should just be like, you cannot work here if you do that. You will be fired and you will never work in this state again if you do these kind of misconduct things. I don't think it even has to raise the level of sexual misconduct. When we're looking at the numbers and we say that, okay, 55% of these cases start on mobile devices. So they start chatting on Instagram or Facebook or text message or something, and then it escalates to other things. Why not just nip it where the bad stuff happens? And I know what the response is going to be. You can't tell people they can't use their cell phones, blah, blah, blah. Look, I graduated high school in 2002. I didn't have a cell phone the entire time. Somehow I managed to communicate with my teachers back then. I know, it sounds crazy, but somehow I got through school. Somehow I did extracurricular activities without a cell phone, and it was fine. I'm not saying we have to get rid of cell phones. I'm just saying that students and teachers should not be able to communicate one-on-one with their personal electronic devices. I think it's a bad idea. I don't want to I do not want to get in a situation, because I know there are a lot of kids who the only adults in their life that are good authority figures for them are maybe their teachers. I know that that's unfortunately the case for a lot of kids. I don't want to be in a situation where they can't go to a teacher if they have something they need to talk about. I just think it needs to be specific people. I think it needs to be, that can be a one-on-one situation in a classroom, with a door open or something. It doesn't have to be, or a teacher and a counselor or something. But like, I don't want to nip that part. And maybe some people do feel comfortable texting. That is what young people like to do. I mean, even I like to do it, texting. No one calls anyone anymore, but there needs to be a way to do it. You can email your teacher. I mean, it's as simple as that. So if I'm a teacher, this would be my proposed situation. If I'm a teacher and a student texts me directly, somehow they have my number, I'm going to immediately text them back and be like, I cannot communicate with you like this. We can do it via email, or I can CC your parents on it, or I can loop in an HR person or whoever, a counselor. It'd be easy enough to say, we can't communicate this way, or don't even write back. Just write back on one of the other, approved methods. I think that would be easy. I don't know if we need to criminalize it. That seems a little bit, I think that seems too far, especially, we're only punishing the abusers with like 4 years of jail. Seems low for me. The other big problem I mentioned earlier is what we call passing the trash. So Sesame wants to end passing the trash. They're saying that occurs when a teacher accused of sexual abuse or misconduct resigns, retires, or is terminated, and is allowed to quietly move to another school district without his or her new employer being alerted to the allegations of misconduct. So basically the way they would do that legislatively is they would have legislation that bans confidentiality or separation agreements in instances of sexual misconduct or violence. And it would require that information be shared between employers. And they would mandate annual training for all school community stakeholders to recognize and report sexual misconduct. I think that's maybe the biggest piece of this, because there's always these situations that happen, and then we go like, wait, did no one know about this? And all of a sudden you find out that like, yeah, all the students knew it was happening. Some of the teachers suspected it was happening. They saw they saw the signs of this kind of stuff, but they just thought, well, I don't have a smoking gun, so I can't go tell my boss about it. But to me, you got to train the school employees of what to look for and how to recognize and how to support the kids in that, and maybe even pull it out of them. And like I said, gosh, remember terrorism and how after 9/11, everything was, if you see something suspicious at all, say something, and it was like snitch on anything. We'd rather have all the information. I think that maybe went a little too far, but I don't think it's a bad way to look at it when it comes to this, because to me, this is like, look, it's our kids' safety. Who cares if I make a coworker uncomfortable by me going, look, you had that person alone in your room with the door closed, and when I came in, you were in an area of the room that I couldn't really see. That seems inappropriate to me. And you know what? Another good reason is like, protect yourself from someone being able to accuse you of such a thing, So I just think these are the kind of things that you could train employees better on. That CBS report that I watched, again, you should definitely watch it. It mentioned one thing where like when they did this training, most of the teachers were just kind of scoffing at it. Kind of like, well, this is, not taking it seriously. I'm not saying this is all teachers, but to me, they got to go above and beyond. Maybe I'll get pushed back on that. That's fine. But I don't care. I care more about the safety of kids than I care about the feelings of teachers. And I love teachers. I think I had great teachers growing up. I had wonderful teachers. And not all of them, but I had some great ones that were great influences on me. But I want more of them and less of the ones that are going to do things like abuse kids. And so to me, it's in everyone's best interest to get rid of them. And make people, mostly make it be an unsafe place for potential abusers to think that they can get away with that, if that makes sense. So I think that I want to drive those people out of society. I don't want there to be a safe place for them to abuse people, but I certainly don't want it to be at schools. And so to me, that's a noble thing to do. So ending the passing the trash thing would make sense. I know there's some tricky stuff there, and maybe that does have to go into a database. I don't know. Okay, so that's a lot I realized I just rambled about a bunch of numbers. This was not very well planned out. I literally just have stats in front of me that I'm reading off. I would love to have someone come talk about it on the show. I probably will in the near future because, like I said, I think it needs to be talked about more. I just don't think we're paying enough attention to this. If those numbers are remotely accurate, they're stunning, and it seems like we should be able to solve this problem. Not completely. I know that we can't make sexual abuse go away completely. But, as much as we talked about Me Too stuff in the late 20 teens, this just seems like, I don't want to call it a bigger deal. I'm not saying Me Too was not a big deal. It deserved to be as big of a deal as it was. This seems bigger because we're talking about kids. And, everyone was so upset about specifically the men in authority places like Harvey Weinstein that were taking advantage of their authority to take advantage of women. But at least they were adult women. I'm not saying that makes it better. I'm just saying we should be as outraged about the kids being abused by teachers as were by Harvey Weinstein and that whole crew of sleazeballs. Gosh, I mean, it is, I don't know. I just get more and more mad every time I think of it because it doesn't make any sense to me that this isn't a bigger thing. And, maybe it's because people think the Department of Education's numbers are way off. I don't think they are by doing the math on the cases we know about and knowing about how prevalent people don't seem to report these kind of things. The math adds up. And 300,000 kids a year is a crazy high number. And that, now maybe that, like I said, maybe that is too high, but even if it was 10 times too high, 30,000 kids is too high of a number, and we got to do something about it. Anyway, that's it for me on this episode. I'm so kind of, thanks for sticking with me on just rattling off a bunch of math and me being mad at all this stuff without really, normally I'm more prepared for, with information and solutions and analogies and things, but I was so frustrated by these numbers and the fact that more people aren't talking about it that I just felt like I had to get this out there, even if it was in a really rough outlined version where I ramble for an hour, because I think it's important to start having this conversation. I'll try to have some people on to actually talk about some experts about some of the solutions and how we can solve the problem. Because to me, that number, like I said, 300,000 kids, man, a year, that is... even if that's an overestimate, there's no number that would make me feel good. I think it's crazy that we don't see articles about this every week. It seems like that we should. So anyway, thanks for sticking with me. If you're curious, this is sort of the housekeeping stuff at the end of the episode, but please like and subscribe, all that kind of normal stuff that podcasters ask you to do. But also, the one thing you can do that helps me the most is if you enjoy this, share it with someone that you think also might enjoy it, or start a conversation with a friend based on something. Hey, here's a guy, he talked about something, and what do you think about it? I don't know. These are the kind of conversations I just don't think we're having in politics, and that's my goal here, is to have conversations with people, even though I'm just talking to you right now and not to anyone else. But the point is we got to have dialogue about this stuff, or we're never going to solve the problems. If we don't talk about the problems and pretend they don't exist, they're definitely not going to go away on their own. And so share it with someone. I'm not saying this specific episode, whatever you think. If there's a short or a reel, Instagram, YouTube, hit them with a 1-minute slice of it, see if they like it, and then they can get into the hour-long podcast if they want to. But yeah, share it with someone. That helps me a ton. It's obviously easier to share on Instagram than it is on YouTube. So wherever you feel comfortable, wherever your friends are, share it. That helps me a lot, and I appreciate you being here, and we'll catch you next time.